Welcome to Sharp Football Analysis. Today, Freeman and I are going to discuss Oronde Gadsden, the legend of Kyle Monangai, and all the best waiver wire ads for Week 8. So make sure you stick around. What's up, everybody? This is Sharp Football Analysis. My name is Raymond Summerlin. I'm joined as I am every week by the creator of FAABLab, a wonderful tool, a tool all of you should be using as you go through and try to make your FAAB bids every single week of the fantasy football season. His name is Freeman Smith. How you doing, Freeman?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Happy to be here. Trying to get some good players for the playoff push.
The good players part of it, this week, last week we had, it was interesting. It wasn't like there was anybody there that I was like, oh, I'm going to go spend 30% on this guy, right? But it was like an interesting week. There were so many names. I ended up having so many tight ends, many of whom ended up hitting. We'll have to see. We record this on Monday ahead of Monday Night Football. We don't know about Kayshon yet, so we'll see kind of how all that ended up shaking out. But like we had all these names, and then I looked at my list for this week as I got started writing it on Monday morning, and I was like, I don't know. There aren't a ton of names this week that I'm getting particularly excited about. And so it is a big departure, I think, from last week, which is not great because this is our first week that we're heading into, the only week I think this year we're heading into with 6 teams on bye. So this is not a great week to be a little bit dry on the waiver wire, but I think we are a little dry. Do you disagree on that?
Yeah, I definitely think it seems a little dry. A lot of the last few weeks have seen some of these names that we've been teasing all year finally pop off and become rostered. So I think that we're missing out on some of the low-hanging fruit. But yeah, looking back at the FAABLab data from the last few years, this has actually been one of the most advantageous weeks to spend your FAAB, which I found kind of surprising because I always think that in the beginning, there's all this uncertainty you can take advantage of. And at the end of the year, you can hit on these injury fill-ins that come into pretty guaranteed roles. But yeah, around this time, you got really good value, especially for like rolling 3-week players where you can find either an injury fill-in for a short period of time or just somebody who pops off. So I feel like we'll look back in the year and maybe think it was funny. We thought this was a dry week. Maybe some of these names will be big names come next year.
Yeah, maybe the legend of Kyle Monangai, as we will talk about here in a second. I do want to have a short conversation about kind of what we're looking for on the waiver wire, because I didn't have last week. I didn't, like, if you went and looked around the industry, and I always do after I publish mine, just to make sure I didn't, space out and just completely forget about somebody, like, it's like one of those, like, did I just completely forget about nobody? Normally the answer is no. Sometimes the answer is yes. But as I went through all the lists, Kayshon Boutte was, very high on everybody's list last week, which made sense. He's coming off like a 2-touchdown game, a big game. I didn't have actually Kayshon Boutte on any of my recommended ads. There were lots of guys that I had ahead of him last week. Obviously, he comes in this week. He catches a long touchdown. I look stupid. Fair play. I look stupid all the time. It is what it is. But like, I think that it's an interesting conversation to have with Boutte about the reason I didn't have him on last week is because nothing really demonstrably changed for Kayshon Boutte, even though he had that big game and he had those 2 touchdowns. Still last week, he only had 2 targets. Still nothing has demonstrably changed for Kayshon Boutte. He's still just Alex Pierce in that offense at this point, right? Which is fine. In good matchups, it can work out. This week, because it's kind of dry, I might have Kayshon Boutte on my ad list just because if you're really like hurting for buys, you need to add somebody. He does have that big play upside. I'll probably have Alex Pierce on there because he does have, that big play upside, and they get the Titans. So that's definitely going to be somebody that's on my radar there as well. But I always like, whenever I'm looking at like these one-off performances, or these big performances like we got from Boutte in week 1, and then like we got from Boutte again 2 weeks ago, I'm always looking at, has something changed? Has their snap rate gone up? Has their route rate gone up? Or did they just happen to get more targets than they usually get on the same amount of routes? And if that's the case, then it's a lot like harder to believe that this is what's happening. That's kind of where I am a bit with Xavier Legette at a much lower level this week, right? I assume coming off that game, Xavier Legette's going to be popular. And to be fair, there is a likely quarterback change since Bryce Young is hurt. So it's likely we're going to get, Andy Dalton, and that's a mitigating factor. And then, once Andy Dalton came into the game, we saw a lot of work for Legette. And so people are going to read into that. But you can go back to last year and see that Legette was targeted on 17.6% of his routes with Andy Dalton on the downfield. It was 21.1% without Dalton last year. Most of those Dalton routes came with Deontay Johnson also there. Remember Deontay Johnson? Remember how fun that was when he played football? I miss Deontay Johnson. But they have Teteroa McMillan now. The Carolina passing attack is not very good. I don't expect it to be very good with Andy Dalton. They're going to want to run the ball as much as they can, right? Especially now with these two backs. Will they be able to do that this week against Buffalo? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe this is a Legette week. I probably will have him on the list as well. But like I talk through all of these things. I go through like, what am I actually looking for here in an ad? And I'm looking for somebody who I think can be the number one target on the team, number two target on the team, in an offense that I like. And I've seen like a big demonstrative change in how they're being used. And like, I think those two guys are great examples of, yeah, they had a big week. Should really go chasing it? I don't know. So where are you kind of standing on those guys?
Yeah. So I think with Boutte, I'm a big Drake May believer. So I definitely want some target to emerge, some favorite weapon. And I think this is a good example of kind of the process you're looking at where you want to see if there's something changing, especially with the coaches' mindset. And it doesn't really seem like that. The Patriots have definitely been the biggest team I've heard about as far as looking to add a receiver at the trade deadline. Now, a lot of times that's noise, so I don't know if it'll really happen, but I think it just goes to show there's definitely some truth behind it to the point where they don't see Boutte as some number one guy. And also, they were bringing Diggs up to speed. They were adding a lot of routes for Diggs. Henry early in the season was a waiver star. So it seems like one of those offenses where things are really murky, spread around. He just doesn't seem like he's going to be a reliable guy. And I feel like this is one of those where right now it looks like everybody's good, but if a true number one came in, it would be like, oh, okay, actually, maybe it's more of a Packer situation where a year ago everybody thought, oh, they have three number ones. It turns out they have no number ones. And so I could see somebody coming in and like a Jacoby Myers coming in and getting a 25%
fun homecoming. Wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. And then Legette. Legette's an interesting one because I was a big Coker fan earlier this season, and then he got hurt and came back, and I thought, okay, Jalen Coker's going to come in, take Legette's job, and it was the complete opposite. I think Coker had no targets or definitely no receptions, and Legette went crazy, had probably the best game of his career. And so it might be a situation where actually now that Legette's able to play in a role that fits him better, he actually will be better moving forward, because that was one thing you always heard about, that Legette's being forced into the slot and it's not really the play style that he had in college. And so I could see that actually working out better for him. But I think the more likely situation is that as Coker gets brought back on, he was running less than half the routes. So if he starts running like 70, 80% routes, I don't think there's a lot for Legette to be sustainable moving forward. I think a lot of these 1 week ads are like that. And the only thing you can really say for sure is an indication of the future would be routes run and a target share on those routes. So I think there's better options than those guys.
The one caveat I would say with both of these guys, with Legette and with Kayshon Boutte, is that we have seen them like heavily involved in the scoring areas, which obviously is a big deal. You could save your fantasy week with a touchdown. Legette leads a team of 6 end zone targets in just 5 games too. So he's missed some time and still has 6 end zone targets. Boutte has, I think, 5 end zone targets. I don't have that written down, but I believe it's 5. I believe he leads the Patriots as well, one more than Hunter Henry, if I'm remembering correctly off the top of my head. So that obviously adds to it. But then like if you're touchdown chasing, then you obviously are at the whims of that as well. So lots of caveats here. What the funny thing is I wanted to talk about Boutte after that long touchdown. I ultimately, because of the week that it is, and because there are 6 teams on bye, and because people are really scraping the bottom of the barrel, and if we end up with a touchdown, that might end up being, especially with the wide receiver position as it is now, that might end up getting you, what you need in a given week. I probably will have Boutte and Legette at some point, like somewhere on my ad list this week. I probably would have Alex Pierce above them, though. In fact, I know I will have Alex Pierce above them because of just the offense he plays in and the matchup that he's getting. And so but they're all like kind of in that same vein. Pierce and Boutte are more alike than Legette is, just because of the types of targets they get. But yeah, like it's important, I think, to not overreact to one week, but then we'll see if Boutte keeps doing this, if he gets if he gets a much bigger target share, then there we are. All right, let's move on to talk about a few other guys. Before we do that, though, if you aren't already, make sure you subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our exclusive analysis. We're now 6-1 on our featured prop of the week, given out on the Friday show. You don't want to miss these free bets. Tune in this Friday, win with us this weekend. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Get notified when we post something. Subscribe at your podcast player of choice. You'll get all of that information. And then also make sure you head over to FAABLab.app. Use that wonderful tool as you get ready for this waiver wire week. All right, first guy up this week, a guy that's going to get a lot of ink, a lot of things written about him this week, and that is Oronde Gadsden, who is a former deep cut on this podcast, has been in the article for a couple of weeks now. We've seen this coming. The breakout obviously came, and so now people are going to run out there. You have to pay a lot more for him than you maybe would have had to last week or a couple of weeks ago as we've been talking about him. But everything from a usage perspective, this is what we've been talking about, I feel like, for 2 weeks, is that this is just the natural progression of this guy continuing to get more and more work in this offense.
Yeah, and he looks awesome. He looks like what we kind of hoped Kyle Pitts would be, one of these wide receiver type tight ends. He's 8th tight end ever to hit 300 plus yards in his first 5 games. So yeah, obviously he looks the part. But yeah, the company he keeps there is mixed. So Brock Bowers, Tyler Warren, Kyle Pitts, and Aaron Hernandez. But I think the talent across the board there is pretty high. I think he's gonna be awesome in the league. I try to get him in some dynasty leagues and things like that. But I mean, this would be a frustrating ride. Like, the Chargers had 55 passes on Sunday. That's not going to keep up. And I mean, even if they threw 55 times every week, I still don't think all 4 of those pass catching weapons would end up having a good week. Like, Ladd had 15 targets. And if you're a Ladd McConkey owner, you're probably disappointed with the week. He not only did he not score that much, but he also has a third competition for targets emerging. Like, this has got to be the worst 15 target game for a player as far as fantasy managers are concerned. But yeah, I mean, 77% of routes for Gadsden, and he's definitely been fully integrated in this offense. I think there's definitely a chance that when Omar and Hampton comes back, they try to go a little more run heavy, but you can never predict that with the Chargers especially. But it's going to be tough if trying to predict. I think every week there's going to be 1 or 2 of these guys left out, and I kind of feel like the rookie tight end is going to be probably the favorite to get left out a lot of weeks. So I don't think he'll be a reliable week-to-week option, but maybe if you can play matchups. I mean, the game script this Sunday was ideal. So if you can find something like that, he's a good fill-in. I wouldn't spend a lot of FAAB on him, though.
Yeah, I think this is one of those, I hope you got him before, because if you were able to get him for cheap and you're platooning him, then you feel better about it. I think your point about just how many people are there. What I will say is Will Dissly's been back for a couple of weeks. We were worried, was that going to affect Gadsden's route rate? It didn't at all. He even had a fumble last week, didn't affect it. Then we get Quentin Johnson back this week, and you say, okay, is that going to affect his target rate? And it did. Like you mentioned, he ended up getting, 9 targets, but that was quote unquote just a 16.7% target share. They just happened to throw a lot. But I also think we should remember that before all of the offensive line injuries, even with Najee Harris and Marion Hampton healthy early in the season, they were one of the most pass heavy teams in the league. They were as pass heavy as the Chiefs have been from a pass rate over expected kind of perspective. And Joe Alt didn't come back last week, but he did get back to practice, so you'd expect he's going to come back. As that offensive line, I did see Mekhi Becton had an injury late in that game. I actually haven't read any updates on Becton, but as that offensive line gets healthier, do we continue this pass heavy thing? Obviously, Justin Herbert's their best player. They wanted to put it in his hands before the offensive line injuries. The other issue is, and I've kind of made note of this, is we've seen Herbert's average depth of target come down because of those offensive line injuries. So we'll have to see how that evens out if Joe Alt gets back, because that's just so important to kind of how this offense is going to function. So I think your point of view on it is right. I think he's going to be kind of up and down just because there are so many guys, but all of the usage numbers and the fact that this guy's a rookie, this is what we want to bet on. We're going to bet on talented young players, because those are the players that ultimately emerge when they get the opportunities. We think he's talented. They also get the Vikings, Titans, Steelers, Jaguars before the bye. That's a pretty good schedule as tight ends go. The Steelers just bleed points to tight ends. And so that's not a bad schedule. So yeah, I think obviously he's an ad if he's available. I just kind of hope that you added him 2 weeks ago or last week when we had him in the article, and maybe you got him for a little bit cheaper.
Yeah, a comparison, I think so. Last year, this time, one of the top waiver ads was Cade Otton, and I think it's kind of similar. He was more due to injury last year. I think that's right after Godwin went down. But yeah, Cade Otton was one of the most added players, and he went for about 9% FAAB. So, and then he had a really good month after that. And a lot of these tight ends around this time, tight end was the most valuable position for looking at the next 3 weeks. So I think that makes a lot of sense when these guys emerge, that it always seems like it's a little more predictable than some other positions. And yeah, Greg Roman loves, the offensive coordinator for the Chargers, loves throwing to tight ends in Baltimore. Mark Andrews became a star, and even Isaiah Likely could get involved. So I definitely think that in a perfect world, they'd probably involve Gadsden a lot, but I think the targets thing will be really murky, and it'll be tough to rely on, especially like if you need someone to produce 3 weeks in a row in the playoffs. I think you're looking at getting at least one dud out of 3 weeks, and that could eliminate you there. So I'd say he's a good fill-in, but hopefully you have a more consistent option.
The other thing I'll say is that there are going to be a lot of tight ends available this week again. Yeah. Mason Taylor, if we get the switch to Tyrod Taylor, which I assume we are all assuming that we will get, he gets the Bengals this week. We'll see what happens with Cole Kmet's injury, but if Cole Kmet is out, then obviously you're going to start to feel excited about Colston Loveland and what we could get from him. As I say, we record this on Monday before Monday Night Football. We don't know what happens with Cade Otton and Mike Evans and Emeka Egbuka, so we don't know what's going to be the deal with that. I believe the Bucs have one more. Yeah, they're not on bye this coming up week. They have one more game before their bye week. And so, yeah, Isaiah Likely, like what happens if Lamar gets back with the route rate that we saw from him before the bye? So there are a lot of names out there. And so I wonder if that keeps it, a little bit lower for Gadsden. So that'll be something that's interesting to watch. You know how you could figure that out, by the way? You could head over to FAABLab and see what people are bidding on Gadsden. That'll give you an idea. All right, let's move on and talk about the only person I want to talk about on this whole podcast. And I left him. This is far down as I can move him, and that is the guy who I have on 50% of my best ball rosters, legitimately 50% of them, and that is Kyle Monangai, who I was very excited about after the Bears didn't add really anybody of note over the offseason, except for him, I should say. And so I was getting excited about Monangai. Obviously, we saw DeAndre Swift come out and just be the lead back. That's what we've seen. We've seen that even though Swift's been really good, we've seen that start to move a little bit in the last couple of weeks. And it's interesting because I wonder if Ben Johnson has finally just recreated the Lions backfield at a much lower level than where it was with the Lions. But like he's finally recreated. The Bears have just been running more. They were 15th in neutral drop back the first 4 weeks since that bye, 2 games since their bye. They're 30th in neutral drop rate, from 60.2% to 50% in neutral drop back rate. They've gone for 2% pass rate over expected in the first 4 games to 2% under their expected pass rate in the first 4 games to 6% under their expected pass rate in the last 2 games. We've seen that shift towards the run, not just because of game environment, but also just based on what they want to do and when they're trying to do it. And so, yeah, I do wonder if he's just trying to recreate that. And if that's the case, can we get enough here for Kyle Monangai, even with Swift healthy, even with Swift, making big plays and playing pretty well? Can we get enough here from Monangai week to week? I have my doubts, and that's saying something because I love Monangai, obviously. I have my doubts, but it is at least interesting what we've seen the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, so I'm from Chicago, and I thought Monangai was going to be this. I mean, he's short and still heavy, and he's slow, but he's actually looked a lot more agile than I thought. So I was on record ripping on Monangai a couple weeks ago when you were singing his praises, and he actually looked a lot better in this most recent game. But yeah, I don't know.
We all come home to Monangai. We all come home to Monangai.
Yeah, but it's like the same trap people fall for after their team plays the Dolphins. If you play the Saints, I feel like everybody looks good. I think the interesting thing about Monangai and the Ben Johnson running back splits is we've seen it like in Detroit, where it's the pass catcher is usually like Gibbs was more the lead back by the end, and he's also the pass catching back. And so it's kind of promising to me that Monangai's receiving more passes. And so it seems like he just likes his style to have it so that the feature back is also the one who's most dangerous in the receiving game. And so I could see if he just trusts Monangai more as a receiver and then wants to run the offense that way, that could be really valuable for the usage. Monangai got up to 40% rush share. And so I could easily see that flipping, being a second half rookie bump type of situation. And also people just hate Swift. I mean, he's looked awesome last week. So Chicago people are still so skeptical. So I feel like in a boots on the ground situation, this is probably how Giants fans felt when Tracy was looking good and everybody's like, bring in Scattaboo, and the rest of America didn't really understand why. It feels a little similar to this. So I could see it actually fully switching. He's a rookie. I mean, Ben Johnson's given up on Swift in the past. He's got the receiving profile. So I think all the variables are there. I'd probably still bet against it, but I mean, this is the kind of guy who could end up being super valuable in the fantasy playoffs. I think he's a perfect stash.
The thing about the fantasy playoffs and the thing about just like the rest of their schedule is that the last 2 weeks have set up well for them to lean into the run, and moving forward, I mean, it's just not the case. They've got the Ravens this week, which, I mean, if it's the Ravens we've seen before the bye and Lamar Jackson's not back, then that is that's a completely different story, obviously. But if Lamar Jackson's back and they get a little healthier on defense, which I believe we saw on Monday that they like Roquan Smith, I think is going to be back. I believe I saw again, we'll see kind of where we are. We record this pretty early.
Revenge game for Roquan.
There we go. We're gonna get him back. The other part of it is but yeah, they play in a good division, and then from week 13 on, the schedule is actually like particularly rough. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that. And it wasn't like Monangai was like the number one. I will say, like, the snaps were 22-14 towards Swift in the first half. The touches were 10-6. So it was a real split in the first half. Like, that's important to know compared to kind of a guy we're going to talk about in a second, is this was not like a late game situation making the numbers skewed. This was a real like split. And also the other part about Monangai is that Swift is only 10-8 towards him in snaps and goal to go situations. And they both have 4 goal to go snaps this season. This was already a split in the scoring area, which is obviously important if you're going to be a guy that gets more like 10 to 12 touches. You want to have those opportunities near the goal line so you can save fantasy day, if you don't end up getting the yards you need. I kind of fall in I don't think the offense is going to be good enough. I don't think the running game is going to be good enough to support 2 fantasy guys. I don't think we're going to see a switch unless something happens to Swift, but at least Monangai brings those touchdown outs, and he also brings that contingency value with Swift, and that's valuable. And you don't really have a threat from Roschon Johnson. Roschon Johnson played 1 snap. It was an 11-yard run. Fair play to Roschon Johnson, but he played 1 snap in this game. These are clearly the 2 guys. And I think if something were to happen to Swift, Monangai would clearly be that guy. And so all of that kind of folds into maybe he's more of like a Tyler Algier type in a worse running game. And that's valuable. That's a good bench stash. In fact, that's an ideal kind of bench stash to me. Somebody that you can throw into the flex if you absolutely need it, and then also has contingency value. He's not at Algier's level in that kind of spectrum of player, but that's at least worth something to me.
Yeah, I think the Algier one is a good comparison. It sort of makes you think, like, what if you just started the season and you just added all these rookies and just one by one waited? Because at some point, all these guys we talk about end up having some spike week in value where you could maybe move them or something like this. But it really does feel like all these preseason rookies, even the late round guys like Monangai, guy we'll talk about next, end up just at some point in the season seeming like the waiver wire pick of the week. So yeah, I don't know if it'll. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, like, if you read the draft kit, Rich harps on that all the time. He's saying, like, if you're looking at, and you can go back and find it, it's still available from probably June or July at some point as part of the Sharp fantasy football draft kit, available next year too. So remember, set a note in your phone for the draft kit. But he talks about like the hit rates and stuff like that, and it is always these first year, second year players. Like that's who you want to make bets on in in the 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th rounds. You want to make bets on those types of guys, especially in best ball, where you can just stash them. You're not relying on them. And like, they're going to give you spike weeks and things like that. And so he harps on that, and it proves true. If you're going to make a bucket of who is the player that is going to be most likely to outplay their ADP in round 18, the answer is almost always a rookie or second year player. Like that's just the group. And so it makes a lot of sense that we get to this point. We're talking about a lot of those guys.
Yeah, especially when the opportunity cost is like, I don't know, Bateman or somebody like that, some wide receiver 2 or 3 on a team that's never really going to have a high ceiling.
Well, that's why Monangai is on 50% of my best ball. Like just as much as we talk about it, that's why he's there, is because he was in an uncertain running back situation. I was pretty sure he's going to be the number 2, and he's a rookie, which fits the mold. And I took him in round, 18 or 20, depending on which of the services you were using. So who cares, right? At that point. And so that's also why I have a lot of Aya Manor. And so we're going to keep our fingers crossed about that one. It's also why I have a lot of Dontavian Wicks. That one's not going to work. That one's not going to work out as well. But that's the kind of guys that we're shooting for. Speaking of one of those, I have a lot of this guy as well. Brashard Smith is our third guy here. This is different from Monangai. So don't fall trap into I'm going to look at how many carries Brashard Smith got this week. And oh my God, the change is coming. That is not what happened at all with Mahomes in the game. Patrick Mahomes in the game. Isaiah Pacheco played 39 snaps to 14 for Smith and 13 for Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt suffered an injury in this game that he had to be carried off the field. So I thought it was a serious injury. He ended up coming back, but he didn't play a ton after that. Obviously the game wasn't really in question. We'll need to see what Kareem Hunt's injury is. If Kareem Hunt's hurt and this turns into a 2-person backfield, that changes the math a little bit here. But all of the excitement we might have for Brashard Smith, it's tough for me because I don't, again, just like we talked with Boutte, just like we talked about with Legette, I don't know how much has tangibly changed for Smith here unless Kareem Hunt is actually injured and going to miss some time.
Yeah, and I was reading some things that said it was actually maybe a serious injury for Hunt, so that'll definitely be worth monitoring. But yeah, Brashard Smith, I think so. He is the kind of guy we're talking about, right? Where these down the stretch running backs kind of being super valuable. But I think also when fantasy managers are trying to make decisions like this, we love to try to find patterns, and they're not even patterns. They're just cookie cutter situations that have happened before and repeating them. And the one I always see with Brashard Smith, it seems like, is Jerick McKinnon from a couple years ago. This guy who came in, won people championships.
Before you even said the name, I knew what name you were going to say. It's just everybody want the next Puka, they want the next whatever. It just fits well in our brains, and I fall into it too. There's no criticism here. This is what I fall into as well.
Who's going to be the Amon-Ra of the Bears? Yeah. It's maybe no one, because that's just Amon-Ra might just be good, right? And maybe Jerick McKinnon was just a certain type of player at that time, and I think the specific difference is that he was kind of an all-around player when the Chiefs needed him, and he was able to pass block pretty well. And I think it's pretty telling. Brashard Smith was in for 0 pass blocking opportunities and 0 goal line opportunities in his supposed breakout game. So I think if Hunt is out, he's still a really good ad, because if you can just be the pass catching back, and Pacheco seems to be, I don't know, his stars not shining as brightly anymore. And it seems like maybe the Chiefs are starting to be done with him. So there's a chance that Brashard Smith just down the stretch, if it was just a 2-man backfield, would be super valuable. I just feel like it's suspicious that in halfway through the season, he's still not trusted at all in pass blocking, and their season's going really well now. Their main priority is going to be protecting Patrick Mahomes. They're looking more downfield, so they're going to want to have a good pass blocker there to try to extend plays. And so if they don't trust him at all, he's just not going to end up being a reliable RB1, RB2. But I think he's, there's a chance 2 rookies do come on. He's big enough to be a pass blocker. So it's not like he's some, CEH type guy that just can't play that role. But he'd have to definitely change in that regard in the next few games, I think, to be a reliable running back. Not impossible, but definitely not what you'd see if you looked at the box score. And so I think I would guess that he goes for a lot of FAAB, and it might kind of be a trap just based off of the actual usage compared to his stats.
Yeah, and the funny thing about him, you mentioned that if he is on the field in a passing situation, he's running a route. And if he's running a route, they're throwing it to him. His target rate per route is 47.4%. That means on nearly half the routes he's run this year, he has 38. He's run 38 routes. He has 18 targets. It was 55.5% this last week. He got 4 targets on 5 routes in week 6. That's what we're talking about. So it's a very like specific way that they're using him. Now, like this is all negative. There's a reason he's on the waiver wire. These are the reasons he's on the waiver wire. I think he is an ad this week because of the Hunt injury, because we don't know where this is going. This is going to be a very pass heavy offense. We had seen a lot of positive signs from Pacheco from like a explosiveness perspective. Those have stepped back a little bit in the last 2 weeks. We haven't seen that pre last year's injury Pacheco come back fully, which is what we want to see because that guy was, electric and was fun to watch, but we have not seen that come back. So there are definitely pathways here for Smith, but it's just the caution is don't look and see how many carries he had and then like start to say, all right, I need to blow 30% of my FAAB on this guy, because that's just not the reality of the situation.
Yeah, I think a similar guy like last year this time, Braylon Allen was a big ad, and he went for 6% of your FAAB and never really ended up doing anything. I think that's a pretty good comparison. Young guy who looks explosive, still doesn't have the number one job, and it's sort of wish casting that he'll get it. And then, nothing ends up happening. I think Brashard Smith's still a great ad, but I think that 6% number won't be enough, so it might end up being too expensive.
And by the way, if you want to know how much Brashard Smith's going to go for, head over to FAABLab, and you will know on Tuesday morning. You will be able to figure out what people are bidding on him, and you can kind of make your decisions based on that. How much you want to bid if you really want to chase after him, because maybe we're wrong. I'm wrong all the time. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe he ends up being the number one running back, and we'll see. Also, remember, subscribe to wherever you're listening to this, YouTube, podcast, wherever. Make sure you subscribe. Let's move on to deep cuts. And a reminder, as I mentioned at the beginning, a former member of the deep cuts is Oronde Gadsden, who everybody is going to pick up now. If you're in a deeper league, you're going to pick him up, 3 weeks ago, then you'd be in a better spot. So these are some of the interesting guys. And interestingly, the leader of my deep cuts is another New York Jets running back, not Braylon Allen, because unfortunately he's out, I believe, for the year, right? Am I remembering that correctly? That he's done for the year. So mine is actually Isaiah Davis. Breece Hall is allegedly fine, and he came back and played, but that injury that he sustained didn't look great, right? And it's just another reminder that the Jets don't have a ton behind Breece Hall and Isaiah Davis, who's the deep cut you should definitely know, except for Khalil Herbert. Khalil Herbert is a legend in my dynasty rosters. He's still on one of my dynasty rosters. Bears legend Khalil Herbert. I still love you, Khalil Herbert. But the Jets do not have a ton behind Isaiah Davis. So just that's a name to know for sure. But there are a couple of receivers I wanted to point out. One is Roman Wilson. The Steelers are still searching for a number 2 wide receiver. We don't still know when Calvin Austin will be back. There was talk last week that they want it to be Roman Wilson. They wanted to get him more involved. That's exactly what happened. His route rate went up to 54.3% against the Bengals. He got 2 targets. He's a 3rd round pick from last year. They have reason to really push Roman Wilson as this number 2 option. You probably don't want any part of the number 2 receiver in Pittsburgh, but I guess it's worth knowing his name. It's worth knowing that Roman Wilson is part of that. And then another younger guy, and again, that's the theme here, right? We keep talking about these younger guys. Chimere Dike, 4th round rookie from Tennessee, had a touchdown, had a good day, but we are much more interested in the fact that he's played around 2/3 of the dropbacks. He's run a route on around 2/3 of the dropbacks the last 2 weeks. I am still most interested in IU Manor. IU Manor was almost a full-time player with Calvin Ridley out. The reality is this offense and passing game, even after the coaching change, was still awful, right? So we're probably not chasing too much from it. But again, we're talking super deep leagues. DK is definitely a name you need to know. Who do you got? Who are some of your deep cuts?
So I like those, especially like Isaiah Davis is the type of guy you could add. You could drop your kicker and add him throughout the week, right? If you don't have the roster spot, and then see if he gets traded, because trade deadline's in 2 weeks, and Breece Hall is probably the number 1 name mentioned. A lot of times those things don't come to fruition, but you can just add them for free and drop them Sunday morning if you want. I know you can never get enough Jets and Titans, but I do. I think Gunnar Helm, he was a guy, Titans tight end who had a big week as well. So I think the Titans had 4 4th rounder picks this year, and it was Gunnar Helm, IU Manor, and DK. And so it just feels like those guys are, I don't know, it's a murky situation, and I feel like none of them are going to really produce consistently, at least this
Agreed.
year.
Agreed.
I am interested in Malik Washington. It seemed like Waddle went down at the end of the game, and this is, Mike McDaniels might be, I say this every week and never true, which is crazy, but Mike McDaniels might be gone by the time they play on Thursday, I believe. So
well, they said that he's not, but again, how?
Yeah, it's crazy.
I don't know, but
yeah, but Malik Washington might be the number one receiver. Waller got banged up too. I think he's fine, but Malik Washington had his highest route share of the season, and if Waddle doesn't play, and Waddle might be the most fragile wide receiver in the league. So I think Malik Washington might be somebody who's actually reliable week to week. I know Dolphins looked horrible, but they won't play the Browns every week. And also Jack Besh, he's ran 80% of routes the last 2 weeks. So it seems like they really have decided he's the rookie that they're going to move forward with. And they could also move some guys. The Raiders might move Myers at the trade deadline, and that could free up he might be the number one target down the stretch. So yeah, those are some good options, I think, that actually could have high ceilings too, not just 1 week fill-ins.
Yeah, no, Besh is somebody who I like. Rich and I had conversations about him because Rich and I did a lot of best ball drafts before the season, and I would always see Besh go in especially in July. People are excited about Besh after the draft, and those priors don't change until August. But Besh would be going round 15 or something like that at DraftKings in a 20-round draft. And I was like, I don't understand this at all. This doesn't make any sense to me. And it turns out I could end up being wrong about that over the back half of the year because of all the reasons you said. The writers are on bye this week. This is, that bye week offers a great opportunity to make some changes and make some adjustments. I don't know if one of those adjustments will be not playing Geno Smith because Geno Smith, that awful. I'm a Geno Smith truther, and that game this past week was just dreadful. So I don't know what the changes are going to be. Like you said, they could trade Myers. It does seem like Brock Bowers will be back after the bye, which obviously that raises, if Brock Bowers is there, he is the number one target in the offense, but Besh could be the number one wide receiver. So I like that name a lot. I am right with you on Besh. All right. That's it for us for this week. We'll be back next week, talk about week 9 of the waiver wire. You can also find my waiver wire column at the website, sharpfootballanalysis.com. I'll have a bunch about everybody we talked about, a whole mess of other guys, other deep cuts, all the information you want, an in-depth look at the waiver wire every week. You find that at sharpfootballanalysis.com. If you're wondering, how much do I need to bid for this player? I like this guy. I like Brashard Smith. How much do I need to bid? You head over to FAABLab.app. That'll give you all the information you need to know. Remember to subscribe wherever you find us, YouTube or podcast. Make sure you check out that Friday show. We're just giving away free bets on that Friday show with Warren Sharp and Rich Rebar and Ryan McChrystal and Joe Gibbs. A ton of great information there. So make sure you check it out. And we'll be back to talk with you next week.